Mystery and revelation, unmasking the mastermind behind the Mau Mau uprising. Kenya in the early 1950s simmered under British colonial rule. Indigenous communities had been dispossessed, pushed into crowded reserves and barred from owning the fertile lands they once cultivated. Tens of thousands of Gikuyu, Embu and Meru farmers, squeezed by taxes and racism, moved to Nairobi, hoping for work, only to find themselves penned into slums. Many had fought for the British in the Second World War and returned expecting recognition, yet encountered only continued prejudice. Among these simmering tensions, whispers of an oath began to circulate. Men and women swore secrecy on pain of death, pledging themselves to the cause of land and freedom. Those who took the oath would later be branded Mau Mau, a name the fighters never used themselves, and their struggle would shake one of the world's largest empires. The colonial authorities underestimated the depth of discontent. In 1952, Governor Evelyn Baring declared a state of emergency after loyalist chiefs were attacked and colonial supporters murdered. British troops poured into the country, joined by the King's African Rifles and local Home Guards. Night raids, mass screenings and detention camps followed. Over 1 million Gikuyu, Embu and Meru people were forced into barbed wire villages, where they laboured under harsh discipline. Yet even as the British imposed their will, a clandestine army slipped into the forests of Mount Kenya and the Abadares, forming what its members called the Kenya Land and Freedom Army. They relied on homemade firearms and traditional weapons, or stole modern rifles from settler farms. With little more than knives, spears, and improvised guns, these guerrillas launched hit-and-run attacks on police posts and settler homesteads. The British press portrayed them as murderous savages. Propaganda films likened them to ruthless hordes, while novels reinforced stereotypes of black savagery. Yet within the movement, a different reality emerged. At its heart stood leaders who blended compassion with ruthlessness, logistics with ideology. The most celebrated of these was Field Marshal Dedan Kimathi, a charismatic orator whose dreadlocked silhouette became synonymous with resistance. He issued meticulous instructions to his commanders, sometimes scolding them like a father. In one letter, a subordinate teased him for sending maize and wheat flour, but forgetting cigarettes. "Dear Marshal, your only fault is that you send your generals maize and wheat flour, but never remember to send them cigarettes. If you have some in the store, please send them to us." Another fighter wrote, "Dear DK, I have no blanket. The one I had was taken away by Juma. If you have one extra blanket, please send it immediately." Kimathi responded to such pleas with warmth and instructions. He tracked supplies, dispatched money and shoes to sick commanders, and even demanded that his fighters knit sweaters, because the forest nights were cold. These letters reveal a leader who cared about his men's welfare. Yet he could be strict. When he learned that fighters had abducted a woman, Kimathi ordered her returned home and reminded his commanders that forcing people to join the guerrilla army was a serious crime. Promotions, he wrote, were not for field commanders to bestow. Such decisions lay with the clandestine Kenya Parliament and himself. Another prominent figure was Waruhu Itote, better known as General China. He was the most senior Mau Mau leader captured during the emergency. In January 1954, he fell into British hands after a firefight near Nairobi. Interrogated for 68 hours, he divulged the guerrillas' organizational structure, revealing that they suffered from an acute shortage of ammunition and depended on food from sympathetic villagers. His cooperation allowed the colonial forces to identify networks, arrest more than 1,000 supporters, and send Nairobi's population through mass screenings. Yet despite this blow, the uprising did not collapse. Units continued to operate in the forests, particularly in the Meru region, where another enigmatic figure held sway. This figure was Field Marshal Musa Mwariama, a man whose name rarely appears in Western histories, but who commanded reverence among his comrades. Born around 1928 in Meru, he was originally called Mkirigwa. After his circumcision, he took the name Mwariama, meaning the one who speaks the truth. Where Kimathi was flamboyant, Mwariama was reserved. He avoided newspapers, rarely gave speeches, and let his deeds speak. He joined the movement early and rose through the ranks to become the highest-ranking Mau Mau leader who never fell into British hands. Together with Kimathi, he formed the core leadership, but he focused on the Meru units. By the time he left his bases in Mount Kenya and the Nyambani Hills, he still commanded about 2,000 fighters who had survived Operation Anvil and other British offensives. Photographs taken on Independence Day show a slight man in a khaki jacket standing beside Jomo Kenyatta. He received the Order of the Elder of the Burning Spear and later the Head of State's Commendation, but his story remains largely untold outside Kenya. Why has Musa Mwariama been overlooked? Part of the answer lies in his region and style. The Meru fighters operated in dense forests, rarely visited by reporters. The British believed they had crushed the rebellion after capturing Kimathi in 1956, yet units under Mwariama remained active until after independence. Oral histories describe how his men avoided capture by never camping in the same place twice, creating false trails and splitting into small groups. Their survival owed much to a sophisticated communications network built by the Kenya Land and Freedom Army. Couriers carried letters between commanders, often hiding them in hollowed trees or beneath rocks. According to Macharia Nuyokanyiri, the Mau Mau postmaster, these post boxes were holes in trees, identified by fighters, where messages could be left safely until collected. Kanyiri himself was chosen because he refused to grow dreadlocks and could move inconspicuously between communities. He once explained that he would travel from forest to forest, checking all post boxes and collecting letters that fighters had written to their families or to each other. This network enabled orders to flow even when British patrols roamed the countryside. The Mau Mau attempted to create an alternative government in the forest. The Imperial War Museum notes that the guerrillas codified disciplinary rules and developed a sophisticated communication system with post boxes and messengers. They issued stamps bearing Mount Kenya and the proverb "Muturi niwe ngoya ruria," meaning "a blacksmith is the shield of the tribe." The image emphasized the importance of artisans, who forged weapons from irrigation pipes and elastic bands, highlighting self-sufficiency. The Kenya Parliament, a clandestine assembly of leaders, debated strategy and discipline. Letters circulated between commanders requesting supplies, complaining about ailments, reporting infractions, and seeking guidance. Kimathi's correspondence is the most extensively preserved, but Mwariama is known to have communicated with him and other leaders through similar channels. Not all letters were written in the forest. In 1956, Simon Peter Ngatia Macharia, known among fighters as Lieutenant General Dr. Russia, wrote a letter from the Karatina Works camp complaining about his treatment by guards. Detainees like him endured forced labor and beatings. Some camp officials rewrote local laws to permit such abuse, while ministers issued statements claiming detainees died from drinking contaminated water when they had actually been beaten to death. These deceptions were part of a larger effort to cover up colonial brutality. In 2012, declassified files from a secret Foreign Office archive at Hanslope Park revealed a cover-up of the Hola prison camp massacre, where 11 detainees were beaten to death. Documents show officials urging one another to let this unhappy incident drop out of sight. Such secrecy delayed acknowledgement of the atrocities for decades. Only after former detainees sued the British government did London offer compensation and an apology in 2013. The British authorities also struggled to understand the movement they were fighting. Early on, military operations lacked coordination and intelligence. Troops harassed civilians, conducted random searches, and screened entire villages. Special branch officers expanded networks of informers, using hooded loyalists to identify suspects in public lineups. Yet they still lacked details about the Mau Mau's structure until General China divulged them under interrogation. In response, the government placed Nairobi under siege during Operation Anvil in April 1954, screening its residents and sending those linked to the Mau Mau to detention camps. Despite these measures, insurgents continued to operate in the forests, supported by passive wings in the reserves. They survived on stolen supplies, homemade guns, and the goodwill of relatives. By mid-1955, the colonial authorities offered an amnesty. Many fighters surrendered, others joined pseudo-gangs, units of former Mau Mau working with the British to hunt down their former comrades. Corruption and brutality among the Home Guard reached scandalous levels. Meanwhile, arrests and detentions weakened political and domestic support for the insurgency. When Kimathi was captured and later executed, the British declared the rebellion over. Yet, in Meru and other regions, bands of guerrillas remained in the forest. Their persistence owed much to leaders like Mwariama, who refused to surrender until independence. He eventually emerged from the hills only after Kenya's flag was raised in 1963. Photos of Mwariama inspecting a guard of honor or standing beside Kenyatta on Independence Day attest to his presence. He later settled on a farm, married 3 wives, and had many children. In 1993, he died after sucking a friend's leg to draw out snake venom, a death as humble as his life had been fierce. Reflecting on the letters and stories of the Mau Mau forces challenges simplistic narratives. They reveal fighters complaining about cold nights, asking for cigarettes and blankets, and debating appropriate punishments for infractions. They show leaders who insisted on discipline and condemned forced recruitment. They illustrate logistical challenges, shortages of ammunition, constant demands for food and medicine. They show moral codes that forbade sexual violence and kidnapping even as the war turned brutal. They highlight a sophisticated system of postboxes and messengers. Above all, they hint at the identities of those who kept the rebellion alive when much of the world thought it dead. For decades, Western narratives focused on a handful of names and events. Kimathi became the face of the Mau Mau. General China was branded a traitor. The Hola massacre was buried in secret archives. Musa Mwariama, the quiet field marshal who led the Meru fighters, remained a footnote. Yet the survival of the insurgency after 1956, particularly in the Meru region, suggests that his tactical genius played a decisive role. His ability to evade capture, to keep 2,000 fighters supplied, and to enforce discipline reveals a strategist whose story deserves to be told. His honorific name, meaning the one who speaks the truth, reminds us that history often overlooks those who act without fanfare. Reading these letters today is a reminder that independence movements are not just about battles. They are about networks of trust, disagreements over cigarette rations, arguments about promotion procedures, and the moral choices of leaders under pressure. They show that liberation was achieved not by a single hero, but by a coalition of commanders, couriers, cooks, and craftsmen who each played a part. They compel us to question the official records kept by colonizers, which often omit the very voices we most need to hear. As Kenya today celebrates Madaraka Day and honors its independence heroes, telling the story of Musa Mwariama alongside Dedan Kimathi enriches the narrative. It acknowledges that the Mau Mau uprising was messy, tragic, and heroic all at once. It invites us to see the guerrillas not as faceless savages, but as people navigating impossible choices. By listening to the voices hidden in archives and the memories carried by elders, we gain a deeper appreciation of the cost of freedom and the complexity of the struggle that brought it about.